Number one Ibble Dibble here. Hello, friends. Have you seen Andrew Gould's interview with Vanessa Gregoriadis? She's a freelance writer who often writes for Vanity Fair and has written a couple articles about Meghan, most famously December 2018's Inside the Markle Family Breakdown, which Andrew says was one of the first stories to take a magnifying glass to Meghan's family history. In light of the recent tragic dismissal of Markle v. Markle, I decided I wanted to go back and listen to Vanessa's version of events, which I never read at the time. That was way before I was interested in H&M. So I thought I'd read and react to her article, which I will do in my next video. Vanessa is not the sleeper agent. Needless to say, Omid Scobie is burnt. I'm not talking about him. Everyone knows he's an H&M shill. They even markled him in court. But that does not mean H&M ever gave up leaking to the British press themselves, the very thing they accused the royals of, saying it broke their family apart. Indeed, I believe they have a sleeper agent in the British press, someone who has been publishing Meghan's petty insults, Harry's paranoid delusions, and both of their threats, as her own words, for years. In the early days, it wasn't possible to identify this writer's words as Meghan's or a combination of Meghan's and Harry's because we weren't yet familiar with Meghan's preferred turns of phrase and buzzwords, her way of ending an interview with a threat, and H&M's very detailed yet faulty timeline and logic of victimhood. Now H&M have told their story in their words so many times, walking us through their spurious claims and their illogical deductions again and again, rephrasing and extrapolating when questioned. With Oprah on Netflix, in Spare, in the interviews supporting Spare, in Variety magazine, in The Cut, there's no mystery at all. We know exactly what they feel and think and exactly how they like to express it. The repetition bores most of us to tears. I've made 2 videos on the topic, Bunker Harry's 28-point manifesto and Scratching a Broken Record with Meghan. Now, with 2020 hindsight, we can look back on op-eds written years ago by supposedly reputable journalists in the British press and figure out who just reprinted her emails. How did I find this lady? I wanted to understand the tone of media coverage of H&M at the time Vanessa wrote her article, so I thought I'd read some concurrently written articles. Let's go through the historic context of Vanessa's article. Meghan posted her Dear Daddy letter, arguably hoping it would be leaked, although it wasn't for many months, in August 2018. In September 2018, their private secretary quit. Despite him giving Harry notice at the beginning of 2018, long before H&M's wedding, H&M failed to find a replacement for him because we know no one is ever up to their standard, and that's how they were infamously assigned Samantha Cohen as an interim private secretary. Meghan famously kicked off October by telling Harry's entire family she was pregnant at Eugenie's wedding, which they then had a fight over in the pews. And then during their Oceania tour, rumors started to fly about Meghan being abusive to her staff and Prince Harry yelling at the press corps saying they weren't invited when obviously they were. This is the same tour where Meghan famously announced to her staff that she couldn't believe she wasn't getting paid to do all this. October 23rd, 2018 was also the first time Meghan wore her $650,000 Saudi diamond earrings to a state dinner in Fiji, despite knowing very well that Jamal Khashoggi had been murdered by the prince who gave them to her 3 weeks earlier to the day. At the time, the palace lied on her behalf, simply saying they were borrowed. In November, despite being told not to, Meghan doubled down on the blood diamonds and wore them to Charles's birthday. Vanessa's article came out December 2018. The first week of January 2019, the Daily Mail published a heavily redacted version of the Dear Daddy letter. And on January 16th, not 10 days after the Daily Mail published the letter, Meghan threatened suicide before the Cirque du Soleil show at Royal Albert Hall. On February 6, 2019, People magazine published Meghan Markle's best friends break their silence. We want to speak the truth. 10 days later, the article we're going to dissect today, Tormenting Meghan Markle Has Become a National Sport That Shames Us by Catherine Bennett in The Guardian, came out. And just 3 days after that, February 19th, Meghan jetted off on Amal Clooney's private jet to her $1 million baby shower at the Mark Hotel in New York, which, by the way, was a 2-day event with outfit changes and professional photographers. Because she was so depressed, she just wanted to die, guys. She couldn't get out of bed in the morning. That's why she made sure to call those paparazzi photographers. She needed some motivation to show up at that baby shower. It's a good thing private jets don't have exit doors the same way normal planes do. Could you imagine if suicidal Meghan had been left alone in the cabin of a mere commercial aircraft, fighting with all her might to open that emergency door and jump out? Forget everything they said about climate change. Meghan needs to fly on private jets for her mental health. So let's pause here and take stock. At this point, do you believe Meghan was being tormented and harassed by the media? Do you believe she was being rightfully criticized? Or do you believe it was a bit of both, neither, it doesn't matter? What everyone missed is that she always planned on using the reveal of this Dear Daddy letter to threaten suicide and get Harry to leave, in order to make this extreme out-of-the-blue claim look less contrived. Personally, I have no doubt that she wrote and planted stories in the press about her victimhood in an effort to gain popular support for Megxit well before it happened. Her PR people probably told her people wouldn't like her very much if she just threw her hands up after one unfortunate article and left. But if she went about building a victim narrative in the press for 9 months to a year, maybe she'd get away with her popularity intact. So the scene is set. Let's get into this article. I started Googling and reading, and one article I came across set off alarm bells because it sounded eerily similar to the Netflix special and the Cut interview. It was written in February 2019, a full 10 months before they left for Canada, and a year before they officially announced their intention to step back from royal duties. Yet, it shared that decision to step down from royal duties and the narrative they've since given us of why they were justified in doing so in the words they use. Let's go through the relevant paragraphs together, and you let me know. Do you think there's any possible way this could be coincidence? Do you think Catherine Bennett of The Guardian is psychic? Or do you think we've found Meghan's mole?
Tormenting Meghan Markle has become a national sport that shames us. This article is more than 4 years old. Catherine Bennett.
Okay, let's stop right there. This is obviously a very early positioning of Meghan as a victim, and the words torment and shame really jumped out at me here as Meghan's. Harry has specifically used the phrase tormented by the press in interviews, and one comment I get from boozy bots or sugars, I don't know, but a comment I very frequently get is, shame on you for tearing her down. This idea that they're criticizing my critique from a place of moral superiority. She is a public figure, and reasoned criticism is not tearing her down. Reasoned criticism is also not torment, harassment, or bullying. If she took a tenth of the good advice I alone have supplied her on this channel, she'd be better liked and possibly just a better person overall. The bullies are her unhinged supporters who make wild, baseless insults on any post critical of Meghan. Moreover, Meghan was not subject to more criticism than any other high-profile royal before February 2019. If Pippa Middleton gave interviews calling her sister Princess Pushy and threatening to write books about her and sue her, and Papa Middleton published Kate's letters in the Daily Mail on Sunday, you better believe she'd be subject to just as much criticism. Meghan has never asked the press or public for fair and equal treatment. Meghan has always demanded special treatment.
Once, she was a breath of fresh air. Now media critics and experts are having a field day. In the period when the acquisition of the former Meghan Markle was depicted as little short of a national triumph, much was written in the British press about her various accomplishments. These are, after all, roughly as common in royal spouses as successful independent careers.
Come again? First of all, Meghan's accomplishments are quite limited. Secondly, did Princess Anne's husband not spend a lifetime in the Navy? Did the Duchess of Edinburgh not go from secretarial school to an illustrious PR career that culminated in her owning her own firm for 6 years before she married the Duke? Was Mike Tyndall not a rugby legend? Is Jack Brooksbank not a successful marketing exec? Is Eduardo not an extremely rich property developer? Shit, even Princess Michael is a published author with decades of books behind her. What an inaccurate insult. Kind of sounds like it's not coming from a journalist who would know better, but a petty, angry family member who thinks she's outroiling the royals.
Now that tormenting the Duchess of Sussex has become a national sport, limited only by the supply of new material, this same incredible handwriting is proving a treasure trove for character assassins. Last week, after her father released sections of a private letter she had written, alleged handwriting experts confirmed what the Meghan pursuit is making increasingly clear. Harassment by the press is not over in the post-Leveson era, just different, and not merely because the results are disseminated instantly, with added conspiracy, on social media.
Here, supposedly Catherine Bennett calls handwriting experts character assassins, as if handwriting experts have any stake in the rise or fall of Meghan Markle. Please tell me which nefarious people would pay handwriting experts to make up nasty things about Meghan Markle when plenty of ex-friends and family, who are clearly the best judges, are already happy to do so. First of all, handwriting analysis is rather innocuous. Secondly, Meghan should be thankful that these handwriting experts didn't point out that what she does is not, in fact, calligraphy. It's actually remarkable that she would even choose this battle. Most people would be too embarrassed. Not only has she or Catherine chosen this battle, but they've also described her fake calligraphy as incredible handwriting. Is it? Finally, handwriting analysis depends on the expert doing it. It's not quackery. Handwriting experts mostly work in criminal court cases. Implying that they're quacks is incredibly rude. And then there's the leap from Meghan's handwriting being evaluated by handwriting experts to her being harassed by the press. The royal beat is a specific beat journalists are paid to cover. They're not particularly interested in you, Meghan. You're not special. The royal beat provides a counterbalance to royal power in the British constitutional monarchy. This is a very entrenched state of affairs for a reason. Any legitimate writer, author, journalist would know all of this stuff. And don't think I didn't notice your sly use of acquisition and pursuit. Acquisition, as if Meghan Markle was bought. What a distasteful illusion. And pursuit, as if she's being hunted. Nice try. Swiping at social media critics, calling us conspiracy theorists. Again, the quality of the criticism depends on the quality of the critic. Trying to label everyone on social media who dares discuss the Duchess a conspiracy theorist is a psycho move for anyone pretending to be a legitimate writer, author, journalist. Catherine Bennett. This is when I realized I think this woman is a paid shill for H&M at worst, a feckless contrarian troll at best. My gut is telling me Meghan wrote this and this woman just regurgitated it with extra acid.
More vigilance over physical privacy still leaves room for intrusive, but undisprovable, speculation. Greater avoidance of libels does not restrict dehumanizing commentary, volunteered, of course, from a perspective of strictly caring emotional literacy. Body language experts will claim, for instance, to gauge her mental state from Meghan's deployment of her bump. Since the IPSO Code of Conduct prescribing harassment doesn't cover any distress caused by amateur analysis, maybe former phone hackers and laid-off bin rummagers could yet find employment as hired gaslighters of one sort or another.
Intrusive but undisprovable speculation. I found that line so interesting. H&M, especially Meghan, have always harped on this idea that the media should only be allowed to publish the absolute truth, but not actually the absolute truth, actually their truth. That would be more convenient for them. And And that's tipped at here by the word undisprovable. In fact, what the media does publish is as close to truth as they can get. In other words, the true or very likely true, because the process of deducement with simple logic. To do anything else would land them in the very expensive territory of slander and libel lawsuits. Speaking of libel, Catherine suggests here that all body language experts are quacks. Anybody who's watched a single episode of the behavior panel knows that's not true. Catherine, by calling real experts quacks, you only discredit yourself. Are you ignorant? Do you have an agenda? Or both? Catherine also tells on herself a little with the Freudian slip of using deployment of her bump. You deploy missiles, you deploy troops, you don't deploy baby bumps. Perhaps you display one, perhaps you show one, maybe you reveal one, maybe you carry one, maybe you hold one. Deploy? She certainly did use it as a weapon. Unelected, publicly funded public figures having truths concerning themselves published in the press, in the public interest, is not intrusive and it's not dehumanizing. The word dehumanizing is used here in a very pointed way that's disingenuously inaccurate. Dehumanization is what happens when certain classes of people, not individuals, are made into second and third class citizens. Not what happens when the truth is mentioned about a royal who is already treated as a cut above literally everybody else in British society through no merits of their own, thanks to a lucky birth or a lucky marriage. This is a common refrain with H&M. People need to remember we're human. People need to remember we're real people too. No one is dehumanizing you. No one thinks you're anything other than real people. We just think you're smug, spoiled, stupid, laughable, obnoxious people. Celebrity gossip is still not harassment. Period. The end. Harassment entails a repeated threat to one's safety, and Meghan's safety has never been threatened. What's also interesting is this phrase, from a perspective of strictly carrying emotional literacy. I pretend no such thing. I don't care if Meghan gets better or worse or stays the same. She tends to be the one to condescend to other people, not the other way around. I believe the phrase she used was something like, I'm from California. It is in the water there. I've done the inner work. I'm just explaining why I don't like her in a straightforward manner. That's not intrusive. That's not harassment. Clearly, at this point, H&M are first starting to pilot the concept that today's media is equally or more intrusive than it used to be when they actually followed people around with cameras, which they really no longer do. If they're not following Meghan around with cameras and they're not hacking her phone or email, what, pray tell, is so intrusive about the press, Catherine Bennett? If H&M feels so intruded upon by simple truths about themselves, may I suggest they stop reading their own press? Plenty of really successful stars do it. They don't read their own interviews or watch their own movies. They don't care unless it affects their income, which in H&M's case would never have been affected because they were royal. These stars don't feel intruded upon in daily life. They feel rich and famous and more at peace than H&M. Lastly, Catherine's attempted double entendre, using gaslighter as an insult, backfires here primarily because it's petty and classist, but secondarily because it's hypocritical. She herself is a journalist, presumably writing with authority. She expects us to trust her implicitly, yet she's willing to posit all journalists criticizing Meghan have the education and experience of quote-unquote former phone hackers and laid-off bin rummagers. Sorry, Catherine, how do I know that wasn't your last gig? You can't have your cake and eat it too, Kathy. The article then jumps from criticizing handwriting and body language experts to briefly criticizing Meghan's dad, who Catherine calls emotionally abusive, and then criticizing Piers Morgan.
The latest example of Morgan's retribution was among several press retorts prompted by an intervention by George Clooney, who warned, "She is being pursued and hunted in the same way that Diana was, and it's history repeating itself." By way of correcting him, a number of royalty authorities seized this opportunity to attack Meghan for the completely new personality defect of being implicitly compared with Diana by someone who is probably not, her critics say, a proper friend anyway. Arthur Edwards, who photographed the teenage Diana in a transparent skirt, the sun came out and revealed those beautiful legs, told Meghan to lighten up. You're not the new Princess Diana. In the Times, Clooney's comment was dismissed as utter fantasy.
So my first thought was George Clooney could not have said that. The wording is just too uncanny. So I looked it up. Indeed, quote, she's a woman who is 7 months pregnant and she has been pursued and vilified and chased in the same way that Diana was, and its history repeating itself, end quote, Clooney told Australian magazine Who? Sure seems like he was criticized for explicitly making the comparison between Meghan and Diana, which immediately rings false, not implicitly comparing them. Catherine, quote, I can't tell you how frustrating that is. Just seeing them broadcast a letter from a daughter to a father, she's getting a raw deal there, and I think it's irresponsible, and I'm surprised by that, end quote. On one hand, George, I agree, publishing this letter was tacky, and I do feel bad for her about it. On the other hand, George, you've been played. You felt bad for her about the letter, and so you agreed to say what they wanted you to say in the press. You did their dirty work for them. It seems very clear that Harry and Meghan placed phone calls to all of their influential friends who might be asked about them and told them exactly what to say. Pursued, vilified, chased, just like Diana, history repeating itself. These are not George Clooney's words. These are not Catherine Bennett's words. These are H&M's words in Netflix, in Spare. But remember, this is a full year before they even announced they were stepping down from royal duties. At some point in 2018, they planned to work this false narrative and thought it would be more believable if they could get experienced journalists and celebrity acquaintances to work for them for free as their bullshit mouthpieces. Maybe this is the reason they are no longer friends with the Clooneys. I'm sure extremely analytical Amal saw the backlash George faced and knew exactly what was up. I also found it interesting that Catherine Bennett accuses, quote, royal authorities, end quote, of attacking Meghan. Now, presumably she means the historians and authors who write about royals, but the choice of words here is very obviously intending to force the association in the reader between physical attacks and the actual royal family. After all, if I said to you, what is royal authority? Your first thought would be the king's power and rights, not an author and royal expert. Tricky, Kathy and Megs. This also makes it seem like everyone's comparing Meghan to Diana, and Meghan somehow suffers from said comparison, when in reality, A, no one thought she was anything like Diana, and no one made the comparison, and B, she wouldn't suffer from said comparison. She'd obviously benefit from it. She suffered from people stating the obvious, that she clearly wished to be compared to Diana, given her copycat outfits and poses. Again, not harassment, not intrusion, not conspiracy theory, not dehumanizing, simply the statement of a truth visible to all. And that truth remains true, no matter who says it. This swipe at the photographer Arthur Edwards, trying to make him seem like a pedophile or misogynist or both, reads more like retaliation than anything else. Lastly, absolutely no journalist agrees with the notion that the British press killed Diana. She was not being chased closely by paparazzi. The paparazzi she was being chased by at a distance were French. No one in the press wrote at any point that Meghan's trajectory paralleled Diana's in any way. There's no cultural or physical resemblance. There's no similarity in where they came from or how they express themselves. No one said Meghan is the new Diana except for Harry and Meghan. The fact that Catherine Bennett even pretends they were kind of outs her as Meghan's mouthpiece. And the utter weirdness of demanding to have George Clooney's opinion respected could only come from a Hollywood wannabe who worships the ground he walks on, because he didn't know Diana. He didn't know Harry. He didn't know Meghan. He didn't know Britain. Of course people are going to dismiss his opinion.
So if anything, Clooney surely does not go far enough. Within months of her marriage, with zero contribution from their victim, sections of the UK press had identified Meghan as someone of whom virtually anything malicious might be said, regardless of accuracy, public interest, and its potential impact on her health. Neither her advancing pregnancy nor one attempted correction has brought any respite.
There it is, victim, princess actress victim. It is so hard to live with the guarantee that you will be at the pinnacle of society and have whatever your heart desires for the rest of your life, and so will your children. My God, the stress. The tip-offs for me here are, again, this idea that what is being said about Meghan is less true than what is said about other celebrities. Then the assertion that royal news is not of public interest when it most certainly is. Then the claim that writing mean things about Meghan is bad for her health and a risk to her pregnancy. If you watched the Netflix special, I'm sure the alarm bells went off for you there too, because you remember H&M blamed the press for Meghan's supposed miscarriage. I say supposed because I'm not even convinced it actually happened. In fact, reading this article makes me believe that her miscarriage definitely did not happen, because while she was still pregnant with Archie, she was already planning on getting the drama and sympathy of blaming the press for losing a baby. In Netflix episode 5 or 6, Harry literally said that all the stress from reading articles about herself caused Meghan to miscarry. But this article makes clear that she had actually been workshopping the idea for a full 23 months before her op-ed in the New York Times bemoaning her miscarriage was published. And then in his Tom Bradby interview to support Spare, Harry argues with Tom Bradby about whether or not royal news constitutes public interest. Tom Bradby obviously contends that it does. Harry more or less argues it only does when he wants it to. So at this point in the article, I am now not only 100% convinced that Meghan wrote this op-ed and Catherine just edited it for style, but that H&M were testing out the excuses they would use to justify their leaving the royal family. Again, the article we are analyzing was published 10 months before they left for Canada, pretending they were going on vacation.
Whatever privacy concessions Meghan Markle was willing, however inexplicably, to make in exchange for royal privileges, she could not, reasonably, have anticipated these sustained personal attacks, for which the sole justification is, ludicrously, that they originate in a man who should ideally be rewarded with a restraining order. Would any of this, it is increasingly asked, given the indulgence extended to most royal hangers-on, have happened if Meghan were not, to use her term, biracial?
So here we have this idea that Meghan just didn't know what she was getting into, which I believe Chris Rock has obliterated better than I ever could. Of course she knew what she was getting into. Only Meghan and Harry believe she didn't know what she was getting into. And again, calling tabloid gossip and social media posts sustained personal attacks is beyond disingenuous. It's duplicitous. The diction. Forced mental associations are a manipulation here. If I say someone sustained an attack, most people would envision a violent mugging, an attempted rape, and so forth. Continually working in this type of manipulative language is beneath a reputable journalist. I'm genuinely shocked. I might even be more shocked than George Clooney. Catherine Bennett, I don't think you're reasonable. I don't think you're capable of determining what would be reasonable for Meghan, and I don't think you're appealing to your readers' sense of reason. I think you're doing everything you can to stoke outrage on Meghan's behalf, and I want to know what you got in the bargain. At this point, the writing is bad enough that we can't tell whether she's referring to Piers Morgan or Thomas Markle as the rightful recipient of a restraining order, indicating that whoever the real author is was feeling emotional, because actual journalists and authors don't have issues deploying possessive pronouns. Needless to say, neither man has harassed Meghan at any point. And then, of course, the elephant in the room, she pulls the race card. Since when were royal hangers-on indulged in the press. There have been plenty of articles about James Middleton's failed marshmallow cake business, Pippa's failed engagement to Nico, remember him? The many scandals of colonial Princess Michael, the generally pretty harsh coverage of the original Fergie, my favorite royal. Poor princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, who never had the right bodies, the right boyfriends, the right dresses, the right hats, right jobs. The excavation of Eduardo's relationship with his baby mama. Obviously, everything Andrew related. I don't even want to go. I have a mental block. I'm not going there. None of those people are biracial. But this is the clincher that proves beyond a reasonable doubt H&M had already hatched their exit strategy by mid-February 2019, more than a year before they told the Queen. I've always thought that Meghan never intended to stay, but she had to meticulously plan and run her play on Harry, who married her genuinely believing she would be the shiniest princess of all forever and ever, and help him be consistently more popular than his brother as a working royal. We know she threatened suicide January 16th, and this article was published February 19th, so it stands to reason that our belief that the suicide threat finally cracked him is correct. Although I do wonder what took so long. Was it genuinely the royal family trying to identify solutions, trying to make it work for them? Or was it Harry still believing Meghan wanted what he wanted, trying to identify solutions and trying to make it work for her? Or was it just the two of them collecting bank and saving face? Meghan's clothing bill alone totaled $1 million by the time she flew to Canada with her 4 suitcases. Listen to this.
Plainly, this affluent couple have choices, and an exit from royal life could liberate them, at once, from vindictive relations and their press facilitators, to say nothing of their current destiny as lifetime specimens for bodily and other analysis. Plus, we'd finally find out if anything would make the Markles happy. That outcome might be less promising, however, for the reputations of the very news groups that, seconds after identifying Meghan as breath of fresh air, decided she was also a hardened manipulatrix, cruel to her poor stalker of a daddy, with a way of being pregnant that really pisses off newsroom executives, and leave aside plunging trust levels, and journalism's deepening funding crisis, will no one think of the graphologists. Catherine Bennett is an Observer columnist.
And there we have it. All that stuff about moving within the Commonwealth, deciding to move to New Zealand, South Africa, etc., but then the press somehow ruining the possibility of their doing so was lies. If they were negotiating with the royal family at all regarding their roles, they were doing so in bad faith. They had decided by February 2019 that an exit from royal life could liberate them at once from vindictive relations and their press facilitators. Again, we'll see this faulty logic explored ad nauseum in Netflix and Spare. The use of the verb liberate here reminds me of freedom flight, both being entirely inappropriate for the circumstances in the exact same way. I don't understand this line about making the Markles happy. The Markles get paid the same for interviews, whether H&M are working royals or not. Isn't this very much Meghan's voice? No matter what I did, no matter how good I was, no matter how hard I tried, they were always going to destroy me. Then there's this odd, super narcissistic suggestion that without Meghan to mock, the British press and handwriting experts would go out of business because she's the first and only celebrity in the world. Having seen H&M say this exact same stuff so many times at this point, it's so clear that this is not Catherine's prediction or supposition. It's H&M talking directly to us. And then another Meghan signature, ending with a threat. One more time. Quote, plainly, this affluent couple have choices and an exit from royal life could liberate them. Ellipsis. That outcome might be less promising, however, for the reputations of the very news groups that, ellipsis, decided she was a hardened manipulatrix. End quote. They told us in February 2019, we're rich, we've got options. Not only are we leaving, we're also going to sue any papers that criticize Meghan into oblivion. Watch us. Upon reflection, I believe that Meghan decided at some point she did not want to raise her kids in the UK. She wanted to be in the US so that in the event of a divorce, she had her children as a bargaining chip. I don't think it's a coincidence that she posted her Dear Daddy letter in August 2018. I think she posted it the week she found out she was pregnant with Archie. I think she expected her dad to leak it. I think she expected the harsh criticism. I think she was counting on the harsh criticism so she could make her suicide claim to Harry and pressure him into her plan. What do you think? Do you think Catherine Bennett of The Guardian has been H&M's sleeper agent in the British press all these years? Let me know in the comments below. Toodles! Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.